Thursday night football, first place in the NFC East. What more could you ask for? We got you covered here on Crossover Thursday. Locked on Eagles, Locked on Commanders.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome on in to a special Crossover Thursday edition of Locked on Eagles, Locked on Commanders. I'm your host of the Locked on Eagles podcast, Gino Camilleri, joined by my very good friend, host of the Locked on Commanders podcast, David Harrison. And we would like to welcome all our everydayers and thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. And this edition of the show is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. And David, for the first time in a long time, the Eagles and Commanders are playing for first place in the NFC East.
Yeah.
Let's just start there. Did you expect that this game, let's go back to when the schedule was made, was going to have this big of an implication come Thursday night?
No, I mean, I think it's hard for anybody to have predicted that, this game would be for first place. And of course, the most rabid Commanders fan would love to stand there and say, like, I knew this was coming and I knew all that. And that's fantastic, right? That's what fans are for. Like, fans are supposed to look at the rookie quarterback and the brand new head coach and the sexy GM and say 14 wins. Like, nobody's going to stop this crew. And I love it. But, being an objective observer, it's hard to look at a team with a new head coach, 60% or a turnover from the active roster from last season, rookie quarterback, offensive coordinator, obviously he's new with the new coaching staff. And it's an offensive coordinator that a lot of people just didn't have a lot of expectations for coming back to the National Football League. So it's hard to say that. However, I will say, going back to preseason coverage, that we kind of laid out a blueprint to what could lead the Washington Commanders to contend to win the NFC East division this season. And it led to 10 victories. So we mapped out 7 of them that we felt, the Commanders could pull off. They've pulled off a good amount of those so far. And there are a couple that they need to kind of steal. The Ravens could have been one, the Steelers could have been one, and splitting with the Philadelphia Eagles is certainly part of that blueprint. And then getting some help from the likes of the Dallas Cowboys, who are, imploding and beating themselves more than I think anybody else is beating them, and certainly helping, helping that cause along. So all of those things combined, we saw a path to it, but to say that we predicted it, I think would be going a little too far.
And I think right now, Jaden Daniels has been the one that really has this thing pushing the whole ship in the right direction, right? And I just want to say, from an Eagles fan perspective, you have not seen this much respect for an opposing Washington quarterback in a long time. And that might be the biggest fear for a lot of people, because we know that in this division, it's usually the quarterbacks that take it. Is Jaden Daniels, he's got to be not just an RG3 blip in a pan, right? Like, this guy is legit, and he has the frame and build and everything to withstand the injuries in the NFL. So I'm a little nervous for tomorrow just because of one guy, and I think a lot of Eagles fans are as well.
Yeah, I mean, a dynamic quarterback changes things, and there's a lot of franchises in the NFL that have a history with dynamic quarterbacks, but I don't know if there's a franchise other than the Eagles that has more of a history. I mean, going back, Randall Cunningham and all that stuff. Like this franchise knows, and so that means the Eagles fan base knows how much of an impact a dynamic quarterback can be. So when you see one wearing opposing colors, I think that's where some of that respect comes from. And, I will tell you, man, and I know we're on a short week, so maybe some of that is the short week as well. But I got a lot of trash talk in my YouTube comments from Cincinnati Bengals fans. I got a lot of trash talk from Bears fans. I got a lot of trash talk from Steelers fans. Obviously, Steelers fans feeling pretty good about that trash talk now. Haven't really gotten a lot of trash talk from Eagles fans so far. So I think that kind of echoes your sentiment of the respect that Jaden has kind of brought to the team. And, not only that, but you also look at the defensive side of the ball, I think, and when Bobby Wagner arrived, there were some obvious questions about physically where is he as a player, but pretty much everybody echoed the same sentiment that even if he's not physically there as a player that he, where he was before, his arrival and his decision to join this team specifically automatically legitimizes the team, and it legitimizes what they're doing in Washington. And then you see that, the defense isn't the best in the league, certainly, but they're doing enough and they're certainly hunting the ball more recently. They're getting their sack numbers up recently. And Bobby Wagner is getting a lot of credit in the press, especially from Joe Witt Jr., the defensive coordinator, who just a couple weeks ago was like, "Hey, man, the opposing offense moved so quickly that there were a handful of plays that Bobby just had to call on the fly on the field himself. We didn't have time to communicate. He's just saying, hey, here's what we're doing, and I know exactly what the call is." And that just kind of shows you the impact that a guy like Bobby, a veteran towards the end of his career, is making on one side, but then the rookie quarterback, like you mentioned, is making on the other side.
And I think to your point as well, you look at Zach Ertz, and I remember having this discussion with Marcus back in the summer, and I think Lou and I said it as well, that a lot of those free agent signings, the Bobby Wagners, right? You bring in a Zach Ertz. For Philadelphia Eagles fans, it gave us like 2011 Dream Team vibes, but to see
Mm-hmm.
everything going right, you got to give a lot of credit to that front office. And I know Lou and I over
Yeah.
at our show, we have loved the draft classes for Washington over the last couple of years. How influential has this free agent class been for this Washington team to get this ship right?
I mean, truth be told, man, the new guys are pretty much everything, right? I mean,
Mhm.
outside of Sam Cosme is a returning player. Obviously, Terry McLaurin is a returning player that's doing a lot of good stuff. Brian Robinson Jr. And Benjamin St. Juste is a starting cornerback. I know a lot of Commanders fans have some angst with him after that touchdown he gave up against Mike Williams. And then you of course have Deron Payne, who is obviously on the starting defensive line, and I think his impact is definitely more felt by the team and outside the stat box, but outside of that handful of guys, Quan Martin is also one of those that you need to shout out. Like outside of about a handful of guys, everybody else is new, whether they're a veteran free agent or whether they're a rookie draftee. And this draft class certainly has made a massive impact on the team, and looks like it's poised to make an impact moving forward. I mean, we haven't even seen Ben Sinnott or wide receiver Luke McCaffrey really scratch the surface of their potential and their ability given on this team, and that's something that we certainly hope to see moving forward. But yeah, man, I mean, it's interesting because with as much changeover as they had this season and as impactful as that changeover has really been this year, there stands to reason to be a good amount of changeover next year. There's like 32 or 33, I don't remember the exact count, but there's more than 30 expiring contracts on this roster right now.
Well,
So
these
the
guys are in.
potential for this, what's that?
These guys are in. Like they're ready. Like they know that this year
Yeah,
they have to go and get it because of
yeah,
how many guys are impending the end of their Washington careers potentially. So I mean,
yeah.
if
It's
if
basically
one
a
team
tryout.
said they were going all in, Jerry might have said it, but Washington really has showed it so far. In all honesty.
Yeah, and they'll tell you too. And DQ has been asked, and he has admitted, like he'll admit that they're a little bit further ahead than he expected them even to
Mhm.
be at this point in time. And that's always a pleasant surprise. And what you get to do is you get to start picking through those 1 year deals and expiring contracts and say, okay, are you a reason we're ahead of schedule? And if you are, maybe we plan on offering you a little bit more money in the offseason. I think obviously, going back to Bobby, I think Bobby Wagner is the type of player like if he wants to come back on a 1 year deal next year, kind of play that 1 year to year type of situation, I think this team would love to have him back, and continue to mentor all the new players they bring in. But there's going to be a lot of contract decisions they got to make, and then of course the players have to make their decisions on: are you willing to take what the Washington Commanders are going to want to offer you, or do you want to try to test your value on the market? Say, hey, look what I did for that Commanders team, and imagine what I could do for your team, and all those things. And then again, Adam Peters is going to continue building this thing through the draft. So how the draft board looks and how the draft class looks and where he thinks he can go get talent is going to play a part into it too. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this team looks 3 years from now versus right now, because as good as this team has been so far, it could look incredibly different. In 20, even as early as 2025, but certainly 2026.
Before we get into the Eagles portion of the show, let's take a step back and look at the present. I was going to say the future. We were just looking at the future, but the present right now. Who is not going to be playing in this game for the Washington Commanders? I know the new addition, Lattimore, he's not going to be in this
No.
game. Who else is not going to be able to see the field on Thursday?
Yeah, so linebacker Nick Bellore, who's a special teams ace. He was a special teams ace in Seattle. He's the guy that they brought him in there for that reason. He's been pretty solid on special teams. Injured last week. He was wearing a pretty gnarly brace on his leg, so he's not going to be available, I don't think, for some time. Certainly not this game. You already mentioned Marshawn Lattimore, and then kicker Austin Seibert. And as much as people might kind of like blow over the kicker, Austin Seibert was the fifth kicker this team had on his roster this season, because that's how much it struggled to find a solidified kicker after releasing the first one due to off the field problems. But they brought in Zane Gonzalez. Zane Gonzalez made all of his kicks last week, so you hope that can continue this week. But it's a different environment. That was a home game. It was daytime. The weather was fairly decent. Didn't start raining until after the game. This is Philly. This is prime time. You know what I mean? It's a little bit more ramped up. So we'll see how Zane does. Hopefully they're not relying on him to kick a lot of field goals and they can worry about him making the extra points. But right now, everybody else looks at least healthy enough to go. Most importantly, being Brian Robinson Jr. To help establish that power run game, because this is certainly a run first team, even though the attention is all on Jaden Daniels. And without Brian Robinson, it's much harder to establish that run game for the Commanders offense.
Two high-profile offenses, a defense in the Eagles that is pretty good, and one in Washington that has allowed a ton of explosive plays. The keys to victory to finish up the show in a little bit, but we're going to talk about the Eagles and how they get things going. The big storylines for the Birds. Come on back on this Crossover Thursday. This Crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Eagles and Locked On Commanders is brought to you by our friends over at Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is now offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning of history and the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic, and a brand new documentary-style course on Marxism, socialism, and communism. All Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lecture. So to get started today, go to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's absolutely no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. This episode is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you're in the middle of watching this Thursday night game between the Eagles and the Commanders and you get a hunch, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com to join today or download the FanDuel Sportsbook app as well. And you could get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everyone, welcome on back. Crossover Thursday. Gino Camilleri, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast, joined by David Harrison, host of the Locked On Commanders podcast. For the first time in 6 years that David and I have been doing these crossovers, this is a first place matchup between the Eagles and the Commanders. This one is going to be fun. And I want to start with arguably the biggest story, David. This is the first time we're going to see Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels. I think a rivalry that a lot of fans are really excited for. And you mentioned it when we were talking in the last segment. The Eagles know dynamic quarterbacks. I think a lot of our fans are looking across the way and saying, this is a kid who could play some really good football. But Jalen Hurts, he's been playing exceptional football. And great news for him, he gets his last Infinity Stone on the offensive line back. Jordan Mailata, his practice window was activated for this week. Fred Johnson, thank you for all your service. But Jordan Mailata will be back. All 5 pieces are back for this Eagles offense. David, how scared are you of Saquon Barkley?
I mean, you have to be, right? Like you have to be afraid of Saquon Barkley. And then we look at the Washington Commanders defense; they haven't done a super great job of stifling opposing run defense or rushing attacks, and that has certainly been a big part of when they have struggled or when they failed to kind of play that complementary football that every team is looking for. That's been a big part of it, and so that's going to be key. And I don't know what the exact right answer is. Like we've seen them kind of take this approach of trying to hold the line of scrimmage, let the second level defenders kind of react to which way the run is going and penetrate. And that, has worked at times, hasn't worked at times. We've seen the defensive line try to get early penetration, cause havoc in the backfield, and then let your second level defenders clean up the mess. That's worked at times. It hasn't worked at times. It's like every other game. Like the first quarter is going to be a lot of, feeling each other out, kind of probing here, probing there. The two sides obviously know each other very well, but the last time these two teams saw each other, they were very different as well. Different coordinators in Philadelphia, certainly some different directions of things kind of going on, and then Washington, like we just got done talking about, is a whole new set. So the question really is like, so we talked to Dante Fowler Jr. He's doing a really good job of getting to the quarterback this year. He's on pace to set career numbers and sacks and all that stuff. And he called Jordan Mailata super huge. That was the way he described him.
Big
Super
guy.
huge.
Fred Johnson
Super
is
huge
bigger than
dude.
him. Funny enough, if you put him next
Is
to
he?
each
That's
other.
interesting. I didn't know that, but he said he likes going up against Jordan because he makes him better as a pass rusher. So the question really, for that from that aspect is he's coming back, and obviously that's good news no matter what. But how big of a concern, if any concern, is there that there might be a little bit of rust there that the Washington Commanders, if they attack him, in that left side with Landon Dickerson specifically, might still be able to get a little bit of room to pressure Jalen Hurts quickly.
The one thing I've said about Jordan and Fred and him are kind of different. Fred is more susceptible to those guys that are going to get under his pad, play with leverage, right?
Mhm.
Jordan, since he is so big, he has a hard time against those speed rushers. So if you have a guy, for example, Dante Fowler, a little bit more speed and finesse than he is like a true power rusher, if you can bend and corner, that's where Jordan is a little bit susceptible. And of course, I think there's going to be some rust bringing him back for the first time in nearly a month. But
Yeah.
Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, those guys have been playing exceptional football on the inside. I'm really excited to see how that battle kind of plays out, because the reason Saquon in this run game has really worked is how efficient the inside of the offensive line has been. And going against Washington, it's been the same characters for years. We kind of know what it is. Can they get any head of steam in that department this year? I was looking at the explosive play rates for defenses.
Mhm.
Washington, you gotta get them in the run game. This is a team, if you're the
Yep.
Eagles, you just have to continue no matter what to try and run the football. But I want to touch on the pass game, David, and I think a lot of
Mhm.
people do, because I think a lot of Eagles fans were expecting maybe Marshawn Lattimore is in this game and he might shadow A.J. Brown. What is the plan for Washington? Is it what we've seen in the past where St. Juste is going to be out there and it's the same old rotation of guys, or are we going to see a little bit of a change up from Washington now that Dan Quinn is in there from an Eagles perspective?
Yeah, you're going to see Benjamin St. Juice outside. He's going to be that primary guy. Mike Sainers Mikey Sainers the rookie out of Michigan, is taking over one of those perimeter spots as well. Noah Benogany, the former first round draft pick, is playing in the slot, and then Quan Martin is one of your safeties. Jeremy Chin's your other safety. When Jeremy's in the box, if they do put another safety on the field, Percy Butler is the guy that's getting in there. So some familiarity there with some of those players for the Philadelphia Eagles. But talking to every single person on this team, and I think especially coming off of the way that Benjamin St. Juste gave up that touchdown to Mike Williams. And for Eagles fans who don't know, I know Commanders fans are sick of hearing about it, but for Steelers fans who don't know, basically picked up trail coverage, trail technique, which he absolutely shouldn't have because he didn't have top coverage from Quan Martin. Quan Martin was the cover one safety, deep safety there, was on the other side, complete opposite of the other side of the field. And he knew it. He knew he blew it. He knew he messed it up, acknowledged as much. But I think this secondary, because of that mistake, is even more aware of the importance of keeping everything in front of you, not allowing those explosive passes. So while the Commanders' defense has given up a good amount of explosive plays this season, what it's better is preventing the explosive passes, and that is kind of what this defense wants to continue doing is making the Philadelphia Eagles drive down the field. And I think when you look at the Eagles, you look at Jalen Hurts specifically. Something that kind of stands out is really high completion rate, really high yardage, really high big time throw percentage, but you also have a really high time to throw average. And so
Mm-hmm.
he a quarterback who is not only really good at delivering the deep ball, right, which is a threat by itself, but he's also willing to hold the ball a little bit to find that deep throw. And I think that's where the Washington Commanders, if you're hoping to get an edge over this Philadelphia Eagles team, is try to get that early stop on a Saquon Barkley run. Don't let him get a good amount of yardage, and then maybe you get Jalen Hurts to hold that ball and take a sack. Now he's been running the ball very well as well, and I think that as a football fan, it's like it's almost I don't want to say Jalen ever like gave up the running, but I feel like he's kind of rediscovering his ability to run, if that makes any sense, to a better level, to a more efficient level. And certainly watching the Dallas Cowboys just completely vacate the middle of the field against Jalen Hurts helps that, right? Helps that ability and helps them, feel comfortable and say, hey, I'll go back to running a little bit more. But I think that's something the Commanders, outside of the Baltimore Ravens game, have been fairly good at is maintaining their discipline as it pertains to the line of scrimmage, the pocket, and defending those mobile quarterbacks. But again, against the Ravens, they did get out of position a couple times, and Lamar certainly made them pay for it. So we'll see if they learn their lesson from that in this matchup, because this is kind of the closest to Lamar and Derek that they're going to get since they saw the Baltimore Ravens.
And we'll talk about the keys, but I want to talk about one more thing, David. The Eagles finally have a defense that might be able to cover Terry McLaurin. I know it's shocking after seeing Sam Howell rip this defense to shreds last year, but Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean playing like the defensive rookies of the year. The one area I am focused on is the Eagles' defensive front. They've been able to get a lot of pressure. I was watching that Commanders Pittsburgh game last week. Obviously, Pittsburgh was able to get to Jaden Daniels. Is that still a concern going into this game, how much the offense gave up pressure, or do you expect them to settle back in a little bit against the Eagles this week?
Yeah, some of that I think, watching the tape of the Steelers game, some of their simulated pressures I think tricked Tyler Biadasz a little bit, right? The center that came over from the Dallas Cowboys with Washington Commanders, he sets all the protections. There's no split responsibility. It's all Tyler. Tyler's, so if there's a blown cover, if there's a blown protection, because of the shift or because of the way they blocked it up, that's on Tyler. And there were a couple moments there where the Pittsburgh Steelers were able to get the best of Tyler, and they ended up with a free rusher because of it. And so that's going to be interesting, because the Eagles are, Vic Fangio is just, his reputation precedes him. So it's going to be interesting to see that chess match as well, and how that impacts things. Now, the other part of that was Andrew Wiley, the right tackle, was injured, had a shoulder injury, was active against the Steelers, but was not healthy enough to start and play, and essentially was an emergency tackle, right? If Trent Scott got hurt or was just doing so poorly that they just couldn't live with him in there, then, Andrew would go out there and give it his best. But at the end of the day, he wasn't, able to go out there and play. He doesn't have a game status this week. So the theory is that he's healthier and in theory might be able to go. But again, short week, it's going to come down to the pregame workout and all that stuff and whether or not he's healthy enough to go out there. If Andrew Wiley is out there, then I think you have a little bit more confidence in that ability to protect Jaden. If he's not out there, then, I think that confidence obviously takes a little bit of a hit. But yeah, we've been talking about Jalen Carter specifically and Josh Sweat, leading up to this game, and the respect that this coaching staff has for him. So they got to have a plan, and this team chip blocks. I don't know of a site that tracks chip blocking, but if there is one, I would be willing to bet the Washington Commanders might be leading the league in chip blocking. And certainly they're going to continue that trend this weekend against this Eagles pass rush to give the interior the opportunity to try to protect those against those guys like Jalen Carter instead of having to worry about helping out the tackles as much.
You might have previewed one of the keys to victory I have for the Philadelphia Eagles, and we will continue to talk about that as we wrap up the show. Keys to victory: how do the Eagles win? How do the Commanders win? Stick around as we finish up this crossover Thursday. Locked on Eagles, Locked on Commanders. This Thursday edition of Locked on Eagles and Locked on Commanders is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. Right now, you can win up to 100 times your money over at PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct selections. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive your first $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. So if you want to get in on this Thursday night action and say that Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels are going to have more than 1.5 passing touchdowns, you're going to have a chance to win some of the billions of awarded dollars to the tens of millions of users over at PrizePicks. It's the only and best way to win real money this football season. If you have a hunch that some other players are going to go off, well, all you have to do is download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, everyone, wrapping up Crossover Thursday, Locked on Eagles, Locked on Commanders. I'm your host, Gino Camilleri of the Locked on Eagles podcast, joined by David Harrison of the Locked on Commanders podcast. If you haven't checked us out yet, make sure you subscribe and like us wherever you get your podcast, and you can check us out on YouTube as well. And we thank you for being everydayers of a show brought to you by PrizePicks, who brings us Thursday shows each and every week. And we're going to wrap up talking the keys to victory here, David. What are 3 things that the Washington Commanders need to do to walk out in first place of the NFC East after this game on Thursday?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I got to establish the run. We talked about this team being a run first team, but it's not just a run first team; it's a power run first team. And with Brian Robinson, expected to be active, with him not having a game status, obviously that leads you to think that he's going to be active. The question still remains: how active is he going to be? Right, since he suffered his initial knee injury earlier in the season, now it's a hamstring that he's dealing with in the exact same leg. How connected those two things are, there's some assumptions we can make, but medically, I can't tell you. But the bottom line is, since he missed that Baltimore Ravens game with that knee injury and then the subsequent hamstring injury, hasn't played up to or even more than 50% of snaps in a single week since. So he might be out there, and certainly could help set the tone. But how much of that tone is he really going to be able to set? How much can he get into the mind of the Philadelphia Eagles defense to allow them to then open up lanes for Austin Eckler or Jeremy McNichols, and maybe even get Chris Rodriguez Jr. They've got 4 active running backs on the roster right now. If they're all 4 active for the game, maybe you can get Chris involved, and he's a little bit of a power back. But the bottom line is, this team's got to find a way to establish the run, whether or not B-Rob is fully active or not. The second thing, you got to stress that Eagles left side of the offensive line. We just kind of talked about it. You got to test Jordan Mailata. I know he's talented, super stoked that he's back if you're Philly. But this defense has got to go find out just how back he is and how rusty he is. And you've got to put pressure on him early, and you've got to really stress him throughout the entirety of the games. If you can get 3 uncharacteristic wins against them, depending on the timing of those could be the difference between winning or losing what could be a very close game. And then keeping a lid on Jalen Hurts. Look, Saquon Barkley, like, if you name a player that you have to be concerned with the most on the Philadelphia Eagles roster, I think Saquon certainly deserves that billing. But to be realistic, Saquon Barkley could rush for 120 yards in this game, and you can still win this game if you keep a lid on the overall offense, right? If you keep a lid on those big passing plays, force them to get into the red zone, force them to drive long drives, and maybe force them to take a couple of field goals where they'd rather have touchdowns. It's going to be really interesting because, Kellen Moore's offense is very kind of straightforward in the red zone. First down, it's pretty much all run. Second down, it's pretty much split right down the middle, so it depends on yards to go. And then third down is pretty much all pass. Like, he's really not trying to be super tricky about it. He's just trusting his guy to execute better than your guys. So if you can get them down in that red zone, then it becomes man on man. Win your matchup, win your assignment, play smart football. And if you do so, you might be able to beat the Eagles.
It's 3.5 points is the line over at FanDuel right now. I think a lot of people are probably going to ride with Washington if you believe that they can walk out in first place with a talented young quarterback and a talented young passing offense and a talented group of running backs. Then you go and pick Washington. But if you believe in the Eagles, it has to start with these couple things. And I'm going to lean on that Jalen Hurts topic. Jalen Hurts, we call him the Hulk over at our show. He has to know his Bruce Banner moments. He has to know when to throw the ball away, because this Washington defensive line, even though they haven't lived up to what they have been in the past, all it takes is one game for that monster to get out of the cage. Jalen Hurts to hold on the ball for more than 3 seconds, and you get a fumble like you did last week. And all of a sudden, Dallas has the ball in their own red zone. And then you throw a red zone interception to Trevon Diggs. So Jalen Hurts, you said you have to keep a lid on him. He has to keep a lid on himself. Number 2, Jaden Daniels is very good running the football. The Eagles have been exceptional fitting the run since the bye week. If there was ever a game to fit the run and contain the edge, it is against Jaden Daniels. You cannot allow him to escape outside of the pocket. They haven't really had to go against many rushing quarterbacks. The last time was Daniel Jones and then Joe Burrow. Not too much success from either of them. This is a completely different monster. You have to fit the run well, keep your eyes to the quarterback, and make sure you guys bring him down at first contact. Because if he can make one guy miss, he's going to make a whole bunch of guys miss in the open field. And number 3, continue to ride Saquon Barkley until the wheels fall off. They were able to get him out of that game last week against Dallas early in the fourth quarter with about 12 minutes left. He is the cog of this team. Saquon Barkley in the pass game, he's been lethal. As a runner, he has been lethal. Now you have the full offensive line back. This team and some of the players, Lane Johnson, some of the captains, they went to Nick Sirianni after the bye week and said, we have to continue to be a run-first football team. And Saquon Barkley, he was paid as such by Howie Roseman. They've given him the touches. They have to continue to do that. And this is the game where those explosive plays can show up. David, I'm not going to make you predict what happens in this game, but I want to give you one more question. Regardless of what happens, do you think both of these teams are going to be in the playoffs come the end of the season?
I do. Yeah, I definitely do think that they're both going to be in the playoffs. You know, if Washington get this win, they're looking at the potential of having 10 wins by the time they hit their bye week. That's crucial. Even if they don't get this win, then they're still going to be favored against the Cowboys the week following. You know, you imagine they're going to be favored against the Tennessee Titans before going into their bye week. So you're still looking at a potential 9-win Commanders team entering the bye. And then you've got a 4-game stretch that the Eagles are part of that, obviously, but you've also got the Saints, the Falcons, and the Dallas Cowboys again in week 18. And by week 18, I mean, Jerry Jones himself might just be checked out. So, you know, I think it's very easy to see this Commanders team now at this stage being a 10 or 11 win team minimum, right? And obviously that's gonna put you in a really good position to make the playoffs, and certainly the Philadelphia Eagles. How about us? Or how about I'll say me? How about me going through a full episode with you and not bashing Nick Sirianni one time?
That is pretty crazy. Yeah, we're 31 minutes into this thing. You haven't even brought his name up. Yeah, that is one key to victory. How is Nick going to be? Is he going to be Billy Walsh, or is he going to be an actual true NFL head coach? He's been good. I've been hard on him. I know a lot of people around the lockdown sphere have been hard on him as well, but this is a game you got to win if you're Nick, right? This is a game you have to win if you're Dan. These division games, they count as 2 wins either way. Your opponent loses, you win. I do say as well, David, I think both of these teams have bright futures when it comes to this season, especially. But damn, am I excited to see a competent quarterback in Washington to go against Jalen Hurts for quite some time, man. This is going to be fun, and I think we're going to both be on edge. Don't cheer in the press box too much, my friend. But that'll do it for us here over at Locked On Eagles and Locked On Commanders. Thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. And for your second listen, make sure you go check out the new Locked On NFL with 2 shows. First, check out the Madman Tyler Rowland as he kicks off your morning, and then go check out the Barber, Tony Wiggins, in the afternoon. Make sure you check out Locked On Commanders with David Harrison. Make sure you check out Lou and I over at Locked On Eagles. Make sure you subscribe to all of the shows, not just football. Whatever city you're in, make sure you go check out hockey, NBA, MLB. We got everything over at Locked On Eagles. But the whole world is going to be locked on Eagles and Commanders Thursday Night Football. David Harrison, thank you for joining the show. That'll do it for me, Gino Camilleri. Until next time, fly Eagles fly, and fly Locked On Podcast Network. You could say go Commanders if you want, David.